You wake up. The world feels heavy before you even step out of bed. Your mind is already racing, drowning in worries about work, relationships, money, and the expectations of others. The battle has begun, but it isn't fought with swords or shields. It is waged inside your own mind, where fear whispers doubts, where anxiety clouds your judgment, and where anger waits to take control. You tell yourself to stay strong, to push through, but every day feels like another fight you are destined to lose. What if that wasn't true? What if there was a way to become unshakable? For centuries, people have searched for the secret to mental strength, but Marcus Aurelius lived it. He was not just an emperor, he was a warrior of the mind, ruling over one of history's greatest empires while facing plagues, wars, betrayals, and the crushing weight of responsibility. Yet through it all, he remained calm, collected, and in absolute control of himself. His secret? Stoicism. A philosophy not of abstract theories, but of real, battle-tested principles that can make anyone, yes, even you, mentally unbreakable. If the world outside is uncontrollable, your mind doesn't have to be. Are you ready to take back your power? 1. The illusion of control. You only own your mind. The weight of uncertainty crushes him like a tidal wave. He had given everything to this company, long nights, sacrifices, a lifetime of ambition poured into a single career. And yet, in the span of a single meeting, it was gone. The words of his employer echoed in his mind. "We have to let you go." He sat there, stunned, the reality of joblessness hitting him like a thunderbolt. Fear crept in. What would he do next? How would he provide for his family? The more he thought about it, the more powerless he felt. His fate had been sealed by forces beyond his control, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Or was there? This illusion of control is what traps most people in an endless cycle of stress, anxiety, and despair. We are conditioned to believe that if we work hard enough, plan well enough, or worry long enough, we can control the outcomes of our lives. But Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, saw through this illusion. He ruled over an empire constantly at war, faced plagues that wiped out thousands, and endured betrayals that would have broken lesser men. And yet, he never crumbled under pressure because he understood one fundamental truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Meditations. Imagine the magnitude of this realization. If a man who led armies, managed crises, and carried the burden of an empire could accept that external events were beyond his control, then why do we in our daily lives resist this truth? Why do we rage against reality, hoping that somehow, through sheer willpower, we can force the universe to bend to our desires? A businessman once found himself in a situation eerily similar to the man who had just lost his job. He had built a multi-million-dollar empire from nothing. He had been the face of success, fast cars, luxury vacations, a lifestyle envied by many. And then, in a single economic downturn, it all collapsed. Bankrupt. Everything he had worked for was gone. But unlike the first man, he did not allow himself to spiral into despair. Instead, he took a deep breath and asked himself a single question: what do I still control? It was a question that changed everything. He could not reverse the market crash. He could not reclaim the lost deals or undo the decisions that had led to this moment. But he still had control over his mind, his attitude, and his next move. He chose resilience over regret. He chose action over anxiety. And slowly, methodically, he rebuilt his life. Not by controlling the world around him, but by mastering his own response to it. This is the core of Stoic wisdom. Control is an illusion when applied to the external world. You cannot force people to behave the way you want. You cannot dictate how life will unfold. You cannot predict the unpredictable. But there is one thing that is undeniably yours: your mind. The way you think, interpret, and react to events is within your absolute control, and it is here that true power lies. Think about a time in your own life when you were consumed by worry over something completely outside your control. Maybe it was an exam result, a company restructuring, a failed relationship, or the opinions of others. What would have changed if, instead of exhausting yourself over things you could not influence, you had focused solely on your response? Imagine the peace that would come with surrendering the need to control the uncontrollable. Imagine how much mental energy you would reclaim if you simply let go of the struggle against fate and instead directed your focus toward your own actions and mindset. Marcus Aurelius had every reason to be overwhelmed. As emperor, he lived in a world of ceaseless uncertainty. He faced external threats on all fronts: barbarian invasions, political betrayals, deadly plagues. He could not control the decisions of his enemies, the disloyalty of his allies, or the unpredictable chaos of the world. But he could control how he faced them, and he chose to meet them with unwavering calm. If he, in the face of an empire in turmoil, could embrace the reality of his limitations and still find peace, then what excuse do we have? Why do we allow ourselves to be mentally shackled by things beyond our power when the key to our freedom has been in our hands all along? The mind is like an untrained warrior. Left unchecked, it flails wildly at every external force, reacting with fear, anger, and desperation. But when disciplined, it becomes an impenetrable fortress, unmoved by external storms. This discipline does not come naturally. It must be cultivated. It requires a conscious effort to pause when emotions flare up, to step back when circumstances feel overwhelming, and to remind ourselves, I only control my mind, and that is enough. There is a story of a man who was wrongly imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. He spent years behind bars, surrounded by injustice, cruelty, and hopelessness. Yet, in his letters, he wrote that he had never felt freer. He had realized that although the prison controlled his body, it did not control his thoughts. He refused to let his spirit be broken by his circumstances. In that small, confined cell, he found an infinite space within his mind, a space no one could take from him. What we fear most is not the loss of control itself, but the idea that without it, we are powerless. The truth is the opposite. When we accept that control over the external world is an illusion, we reclaim the ultimate power, the ability to shape our own perspective. You have faced storms before. You have been blindsided by unexpected events, by losses, by disappointments. But each time, you have had a choice. You could resist and suffer, or you could accept and adapt. Look back on the times when you tried to control what was beyond your reach. Did it bring peace, or did it drain you? Now imagine how your life would change if you no longer allowed external forces to dictate your inner state. The world will not always be kind. People will betray you. Opportunities will slip away, and circumstances will change in ways you never anticipated. But none of that has the power to disturb your peace unless you allow it to. You alone decide whether to let the storm inside or to remain calm in its midst. Today, you have the power to make that choice. The choice to stop resisting what is beyond you and instead master what is within. The choice to build an unshakable mind, one that no external event can ever break. Because at the end of the day, no matter what happens around you, one truth remains: you only own your mind. 2. Embracing adversity. Why pain is your greatest teacher. The stadium fell silent. The crowd held its breath as the athlete lay motionless on the track, his body twisted in pain. Moments earlier, he had been flying toward victory, every muscle in his body working in perfect harmony. Now, everything was shattered. The medics rushed in, faces filled with concern. His mind raced faster than his body ever had. Is this the end? The months of grueling training, the years of sacrifice, was it all for nothing? Adversity has a way of stopping us in our tracks, making us question everything. It forces us into discomfort, challenging us to either break or adapt. Most people see pain as an enemy, something to avoid at all costs. But Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who ruled over Rome in its most turbulent years, saw pain differently. He believed that obstacles were not roadblocks, but stepping stones, that every difficulty contained an opportunity. He wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Meditations. Modern neuroscience supports this ancient wisdom. The human brain is designed to adapt under pressure. When faced with hardship, our neural pathways rewire, forging new connections, strengthening resilience. Growth doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in struggle. Pain, both physical and emotional, is the catalyst for transformation. The same way that muscles grow through resistance, the mind strengthens through adversity. Yet, despite this truth, most people resist pain, seeing it as an unnecessary suffering rather than a necessary evolution. The injured athlete could have seen his setback as the end of his career. Many would have, but instead, he chose to ask himself a different question. What if this is not the end, but the beginning of something greater? He adapted. While his competitors continued their rigorous training, he focused on what he could still control. He strengthened his mind, studied his sport at a deeper level, refined techniques he had never given attention to before. He came back, not just as a stronger athlete, but as a completely transformed competitor. His setback had secretly been his greatest advantage. Think about your own life. How often have you let obstacles define you? How many times have you seen failure as a confirmation of your limitations, rather than as an opportunity to grow? Imagine if every hardship, every loss, every painful moment was actually preparing you for something greater. What would change? Marcus Aurelius faced some of the greatest adversities in history, plagues that wiped out entire populations, wars that threatened the stability of his empire, betrayals from those closest to him. Yet, rather than complain or resist, he leaned into these challenges. He saw them not as punishments, but as opportunities to develop the kind of resilience that no external force could shake. If Rome was under attack, it was a chance to become a better strategist. If sickness swept through his people, it was a chance to strengthen his leadership. The difference between those who crumble under adversity and those who thrive is not luck, it is perspective. A mind conditioned to see hardship as a burden will always suffer, but a mind trained to see adversity as fuel will turn obstacles into power. There is a story of a man who lost everything overnight: his job, his reputation, his financial security. At first, he did what anyone would do. He panicked. He questioned his worth, fell into despair, allowed self-doubt to take over. But then, a realization struck him. If this is rock bottom, then there is only one direction left to go: up. He used the experience to rebuild himself from the ground up, learning new skills, adopting a mindset that no longer feared failure. Years later, he looked back and understood. The moment he thought was his downfall had actually been the foundation of his greatest success. Your mind is your battlefield. The world will throw difficulties your way, unexpected losses, broken dreams, painful failures. You have two choices: to see them as barriers or to see them as blueprints for growth. Your brain, your body, your entire being is designed to evolve through struggle. The question is, Will you let it? History has proven that the strongest minds are not those that avoided pain, but those that embraced it. The greatest leaders, innovators, and thinkers did not rise because life was easy for them, but because they learned to transform adversity into fuel. The Wright brothers did not build the first airplane because the skies were welcoming, but because they refused to let gravity stop them. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb because he was lucky, but because he failed thousands of times and refused to stop trying. Nelson Mandela did not become a symbol of resilience because life was kind to him, but because he endured 27 years in prison and emerged stronger. And you, what if your struggles were secretly gifts in disguise? What if your failures were preparing you for wisdom? What if your setbacks were clearing the path for something greater? The storm you are facing right now is not here to break you, it is here to shape you. The question is, will you let it? Marcus Aurelius knew that pain was inevitable, but suffering was optional. He understood that every difficulty, no matter how great, contained within it the potential for growth. The athlete who refused to give up, the man who rebuilt his life from nothing, the historical figures who turned obstacles into triumphs, they all tapped into a simple truth. What stands in the way becomes the way. Now ask yourself, what if every setback in your life was secretly preparing you for something greater? 3. The power of rational thinking. Master your emotions. The message came late at night, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. He hesitated, hands shaking slightly, already sensing what was about to unfold. And then, there it was, the confirmation of a betrayal he never thought possible. The person he had trusted most had deceived him. Anger surged like wildfire, every nerve in his body urging him to react, to confront, to lash out. His mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios, his vision blurred with rage. But then something remarkable happened. He stopped. He took a breath. He reminded himself that at this very moment he stood at a crossroads, not just of emotions, but of identity. He could let his emotions take control, or he could take control of them. He remembered the words of Marcus Aurelius. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Meditations. Rational thinking is the foundation of mental strength, yet most people live as prisoners to their emotions. They react impulsively, allowing anger, fear, and insecurity to dictate their decisions. But emotions are unreliable narrators. They distort reality, making us believe we are powerless, when in truth, we are not. The Stoics understood this well. They knew that no external event, not betrayal, not failure, not even death, has the power to harm us unless we allow it to. The only thing that truly matters is how we interpret and respond to what happens. Imagine a surgeon in the middle of a high-stakes operation. The patient is bleeding out, alarms are ringing, and the pressure is immense. If the surgeon lets panic take over, they will make a fatal mistake. But if they remain calm, if they focus on what needs to be done rather than the chaos around them, they can save a life. The ability to master emotions is not just a philosophical ideal, it is a survival skill. Think about how often your emotions have clouded your judgment. How many times have you reacted in anger, only to regret it later? How often has fear held you back from an opportunity? How many decisions have been made not from reason, but from impulse? What if, instead of being a slave to your emotions, you could train yourself to always see situations rationally? Marcus Aurelius did not have the luxury of indulging in emotional outbursts. As Emperor of Rome, he had to make decisions that affected millions. If he allowed anger or fear to dictate his choices, the consequences would be catastrophic. He trained himself daily to separate emotion from action, to observe his feelings without letting them take control, and in doing so, he built an unshakable mind. The man who discovered the betrayal could have let his emotions destroy him. He could have confronted the person in anger, made impulsive decisions he would later regret. But instead, he paused. He asked himself a simple yet profound question: what is within my control right now? He could not change what had happened. He could not control the actions of others, but he could control how he responded, and that was enough. There is a reason why the most successful leaders, athletes, and thinkers practice emotional control. It is not because they do not feel; on the contrary, they feel deeply, but they refuse to let those feelings dictate their actions. They understand that emotions are like storms. If you let them rage unchecked, they will destroy everything in their path. But if you learn to observe them, to let them pass without attachment, they lose their power over you. Imagine a pilot flying through turbulence. The passengers may panic, gripping their seats, gasping at every jolt. But the pilot remains calm, focused only on what needs to be done. Why? Because he knows that fear does not change the turbulence. It only makes it harder to navigate. Life is full of turbulence. The question is, will you be the panicked passenger or the calm pilot? Emotional mastery is not about suppression. It is about understanding. When you feel anger, recognize it. When fear creeps in, acknowledge it, but do not let it take the wheel. Instead, ask yourself, is this emotion helping me, or is it blinding me? A man once lost everything: his job, his home, his sense of security. At first, he was consumed by fear, but then he realized something. Fear would not solve his problems. Fear would not put food on the table. Fear would not rebuild his life. So he let it go. He focused on what he could control, his next move. And in doing so, he transformed what could have been his downfall into the foundation for something new. You will face moments of betrayal, moments of fear, moments where emotions threaten to take control. But you are not powerless. You have the ability to step back, to observe, to choose a response that aligns with your highest self. The world will always be unpredictable, but your mind does not have to be. Marcus Aurelius ruled over an empire in turmoil, yet he remained unshaken. If he could master his emotions amidst war, political chaos, and personal loss, then so can you. The question is, will you? Will you let emotions control you, or will you take control of them? Will you react, or will you respond? Because at the end of the day, the true test of strength is not in overpowering others, it is in mastering yourself. 4. Memento Mori, the Stoic secret to living without fear. The sound of the explosion tore through the cabin. The plane shuddered violently as passengers screamed. Oxygen masks fell from the ceiling. A man clutched his seat, his knuckles turning white as he felt the weightless drop of the aircraft spiraling downward. In those seconds, life unraveled before his eyes. Every regret, every wasted moment, every word left unsaid came rushing back in a flood of unbearable clarity. He was about to die. And in that moment, one thought consumed him. I should have lived differently, but fate had other plans. Against all odds, the plane made an emergency landing. The man, shaking as he stepped off, realized something extraordinary. He had been given a second chance, a rare moment where death had knocked at his door, but left him standing. He knew he could never live the same way again. From that day forward, every sunrise was a gift. Every interaction had meaning. Every decision was made with the awareness that time was slipping away, and there was no way to know how much of it remained. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, understood this truth centuries ago. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Meditations. Memento Mori, the practice of remembering that you will die, is not meant to be morbid or depressing. It is meant to awaken you, to shake you out of the illusion that you have time to waste, to remind you that every breath is borrowed and could be your last. We live as if we are immortal. We delay our dreams, hold grudges, waste time on trivialities, and assume that tomorrow is guaranteed. But the truth is, it isn't. Every person you love, everything you cherish, everything you assume will always be there. One day it won't. And when that day comes, will you look back with peace, knowing you lived fully, or will you be consumed by regret? Think about how differently you would live if you truly embraced this reality. If today was your last day, would you waste time scrolling mindlessly on your phone? Would you let petty arguments steal your peace? Would you stay stuck in a job you hate, in a relationship that drains you, in a routine that numbs you? Or would you finally chase what matters, say what needs to be said, love fiercely, and experience life in its rawest, most beautiful form? History is full of people who only truly began to live after facing death. There is the man who survived a heart attack and spent the rest of his years reconnecting with his family, building memories instead of chasing money. There is the woman who beat cancer and vowed to never let a day pass without gratitude. There is the soldier who barely escaped an explosion and swore never to let fear hold him back again. These people were given a wake-up call. But why wait for tragedy to remind you of what's important? Imagine standing at the edge of your own mortality, looking back at your life. What moments will matter? The times you laughed uncontrollably with friends, the quiet moments of love and connection, the times you pushed past fear and fully embraced the present. Those will be the treasures you carry into the unknown, not the worries, not the stress, not the opinions of others that once seemed so important. Marcus Aurelius did not fear death because he understood that it was not the enemy, it was the greatest teacher. He knew that by keeping death close, by remembering its inevitability, he could live each moment with purpose. And so can you. Right now, take a deep breath and ask yourself, if this were my last day on earth, how would I spend it? Would you call that person you've been meaning to reconcile with? Would you finally take that risk you've been avoiding? Would you speak with more kindness, act with more courage, love with more intensity? The world distracts us with endless noise, pulling us away from what truly matters. But death has a way of stripping away the superficial, leaving only what is real: love, courage, gratitude, meaning. Most people fear death because they are not truly living. They exist, but they do not embrace life. They wait for the perfect moment, the right opportunity, the guarantee of safety. But the only guarantee is this: life is uncertain, and time is slipping away. You have two choices. You can ignore this truth, push it aside, continue living as if you have forever. Or you can embrace it, let it fuel you, let it awaken something deep inside of you that refuses to waste another second. Memento Mori is not about dwelling on death. It is about choosing life fully, fearlessly, without hesitation. Because at the end of the day, the greatest tragedy is not that we die, it is that we never truly lived. Now ask yourself, what if you lived every day as if it were your last? How would your priorities change? 5. The discipline of daily reflection. Train your mind like a warrior. The morning sun had not yet risen, but the warrior was already awake. He sat in silence, his brush poised above parchment, carefully inscribing his thoughts from the day before. He reflected on his mistakes, his victories, his emotions, and the lessons they carried. This was not just a habit. It was his discipline, a ritual as essential as sharpening his sword. He was a samurai, trained not only in battle, but in the art of the mind. And he knew that without daily reflection, without deliberately refining his thoughts, he would be at the mercy of his emotions, his fears, and the chaos of the world around him. Centuries earlier, Marcus Aurelius did the same. As the ruler of the vast Roman Empire, he carried the weight of war, politics, and responsibility. And yet, every night, he wrote. His private reflections, later compiled into meditations, were not meant for an audience. They were meant for himself, a way to train his mind like a warrior, to strip away illusions, to hold himself accountable, to prepare for the challenges that lay ahead. He understood that the mind, like the body, must be exercised daily. And he also knew that the greatest battle any person will ever fight is not against an external enemy, but against their own weaknesses, impulses, and distractions. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.'" This was his reminder that every day was an opportunity to live with purpose, to refine his character, to act with discipline rather than desire. Most people wake up and let the day control them. They reach for their phones, they react to their environment, they drift through their hours without awareness. They let the world dictate their state of mind instead of taking control of it. But the Stoic warrior does not live that way. The Stoic warrior begins each day with intention and ends each night with reflection. Imagine if, for just 5 minutes a day, you practice this discipline. Imagine waking up and setting a clear intention for how you want to conduct yourself, not based on circumstances, but based on your values. Imagine ending your day by writing down what went well, what you could have done better, and what lesson you can take into tomorrow. How different would your mindset be? The samurai and the Stoics understood that without self-reflection, a person is like a ship without a captain, drifting aimlessly at the mercy of the wind. They knew that if they did not take time to examine their thoughts and actions, they would be ruled by impulses, repeating the same mistakes, failing to evolve. A warrior does not train only when battle arrives. A warrior trains every day, preparing for the inevitable challenges ahead. And in life, those battles come in many forms. The temptation to react with anger, the urge to procrastinate, the fear that stops you from taking action. These are the enemies you face daily. And like any warrior, you must be ready. Reflection is not about guilt. It is not about dwelling on mistakes or indulging in self-criticism. It is about clarity. It is about looking at your thoughts and actions objectively, as if you were an outsider observing yourself. It is about asking, did I live according to my principles today? Did I let emotions control me? Did I waste time on things that do not matter? Consider the samurai once more. Before entering battle, he does not simply rush forward. He studies his opponent, anticipates weaknesses, sharpens his blade. He prepares. And in the same way, the Stoic prepares for life's battles through daily reflection. He does not wait for adversity to test his patience. He trains his patience every day. He does not wait for hardship to test his resilience. He builds his resilience through practice. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayals, plagues, wars, and the immense burden of leadership. Yet his meditations reveal a man who remained composed, clear-headed, and focused. Why? Because every day he disciplined his mind through reflection. It is easy to assume that wisdom comes naturally, that over time we simply become better, stronger, wiser, but this is a dangerous illusion. Without self-awareness, without reflection, we do not grow, we repeat. We repeat our mistakes, our destructive patterns, our conditioned reactions. Growth is intentional. Strength is built, not inherited. There is a famous story of a man who spent years trying to master self-control. He studied philosophy, read books on Stoicism, practiced mindfulness, but still found himself reacting impulsively when things went wrong. Frustrated, he sought advice from an old monk. The monk handed him a bowl of water and asked him to shake it. The man did, and the water splashed everywhere. Then the monk asked him to let it sit. Slowly, the water became still. "Your mind is the same," the monk said. "If you do not take time to let your thoughts settle, you will always live in reaction. Reflection is the act of letting the water still." And now, the question turns to you. Will you let life dictate your mindset, or will you take control? Will you train your mind like a warrior, or will you leave it vulnerable to every storm that passes through? Tonight, take 5 minutes. Write down what challenged you today. Write down where you let emotions take control. Write down one way you can be stronger tomorrow. Do this every day and watch as your mindset transforms. A warrior does not sharpen his sword once. He sharpens it daily. The mind is no different. If you seek strength, if you seek clarity, if you seek unshakable resilience, then train your mind with the discipline it deserves. Some will read this and agree, nodding in understanding, yet take no action. They will think, "That is a good idea," and move on without implementing it. But the true warrior does not just think, he acts, he commits to the practice. He understands that reflection is not optional, but essential. So will you let another day pass without awareness? Or will you take control, starting now? Will you take 5 minutes today to reflect, or will you continue to drift? The choice is yours. The value of this writing is not merely in the philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, but in something far greater: the way these principles have the power to transform real lives. Philosophy means nothing if it remains confined to books and theories. Its true strength lies in action, in the way it reshapes the mind, fortifies the spirit, and equips us to face life with unwavering resilience. We have uncovered the 5 core secrets of mental strength through Stoicism. First, the realization that you only control your mind, not external events. This is the foundation for escaping anxiety, helplessness, and frustration. Second, adversity is not the enemy. It is the greatest teacher. Hardships do not destroy you. It is how you respond to them that defines your strength. Third, reason is your most powerful weapon, allowing you to master your emotions instead of being ruled by them. Fourth, Memento Mori reminds us that death is not to be feared, but to be embraced as a driving force to live more meaningfully. And finally, the discipline of daily reflection is the key to forging an unshakable mind, a mind that remains steadfast in the face of life's challenges. But knowing is not enough. Understanding is not enough. You must practice. The question is no longer whether these principles are true. The question is whether you have the courage to live by them. Marcus Aurelius did not seek an easy life. He did not expect the world to be fair, nor did he waste time complaining about hardships. Instead, he focused on what he could control: his mind, his actions, his response to adversity. And because of that, he remained unshaken, no matter what chaos surrounded him. His philosophy is not just a relic of the past. It is a timeless blueprint for those who seek true mental strength. If a Roman emperor, burdened with war, disease, and betrayal, could cultivate an unbreakable mindset, then what excuse do we have? Today, we are constantly bombarded with distractions, negativity, and uncertainty. But we have a choice. We can either let the world dictate our emotions, or we can take ownership of our minds. True power is not found in wealth, status, or external circumstances. It is found in the ability to control your own thoughts. And once you master that, nothing can break you. Tonight, before you sleep, take 5 minutes to reflect. Ask yourself, did I react with wisdom today? Did I focus on what I could control? Did I embrace challenges instead of running from them? These small acts of self-discipline, practiced daily, will forge a mind that is calm, clear, and indestructible. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs it. Let's create a world where mental strength is not the exception, but the norm. If you found value in this, like, share, and subscribe, because together we can inspire more people to live with courage, clarity, and purpose. And before you go, I leave you with this challenge. What would your life look like if you stopped fearing what you cannot control and started mastering what you can?